right, it's another edition. I want to do. I wish I was Barry White. I think that's why I'm talking like this. It's
That's
another
what you
edition.
sound like.
It's another edition of Gray Matter. I'm David Madalena, and joining me as always is my co-host, Mr. Robert Lee Davis. How are you today,
How's it
Rob?
going? I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, man. How's the weather in Brooklyn?
It is warming up.
It's
I'm
warming up.
happy about that.
Spring is in the air, man. It was like 60 degrees today. I even wore shorts for a little while outside because, in Colorado, you usually wear
Yeah.
shorts when it's like in the 50s. But
Yes.
you
Especially
haven't
if you're
know.
white.
Is that what it is? It's because we're white? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, black people don't do that.
you don't. Yeah, well, I get it. That's why we don't see as many of our African American brethren out here because I don't think they're
Yes.
feeling it.
No.
Anyway, it's another edition.
Oops.
I want to do. I just gotta mute that. All right, now I can see our comments. Hopefully, we already have someone joining us. Feel free to pipe in our conversation. We have a couple of good little conversations we're having today.
Yes.
What do you want to talk about? So we have two. We have we're going to talk a little bit about cancel culture and that whole Dr. Seuss story because that will definitely stimulate some interesting conversation between you and I. And then what was the other one? Voter suppression, and we'll kind of highlight a little bit in Georgia. And it's interesting because I kind of when we talked about topics, right, Rob? I also kind of put in there, what. FBI Director Wray said. He's like, well, white supremacy and terrorism is the number one threat to the United States. And I was like, well, we could talk about that, and we probably will at some point.
Right.
Um,
Right.
right. But I was like, I think voter suppression is actually a really big threat to our democracy and to the United States as well. And
It
that's,
is.
Georgia is a perfect example, right? So
Mhm.
we have Georgia, flips Democratic, right, for the Senate and made a big difference in what Biden can potentially do, even though the Democrats someday we're gonna have the conversation of how they're still finding a way to fail, even when
It's because they're trying. I can't say they, so such a broad statement.
Yeah.
But I believe there is too much of a desire. Again, which is why Joe Biden does not thrill me in any way, because there's too much of a desire to play nice.
you're playing nice and then you get your hand slapped every time you reach that olive
Can't play
branch.
nice anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, there's more Democrats that are like, we don't want you to compromise. Just go for what we want. This compromise is BS. And so we'll get into that conversation. But right now the Republicans have no problem doing everything they can to cheat in an election. And they've even in the Supreme Court, they even made the argument at the Supreme Court, like, we know this will help Republicans, and that's what we're doing. So they're not even hiding it anymore. But Georgia's a fun special case, right? I mean, it flips to the Democratic side this year, and obviously with huge fanfare and notice. But you have, again, Raffensperger is a Secretary of State of Republican legislature, and the Republican legislature there is trying to muscle through this. Basically more voter suppression. They're rolling back some of the access they got, which is why they say they lost. And I'm sorry, if more access to voters is there, then that's what you should have in a democracy.
But also, many of these things were things that they instituted, that Republicans instituted. They
did.
wanted to have, but now that it, from their perspective, worked against them, they want to get rid of it.
It's amazing. It's like, imagine a football team getting to change the rules of the game they're playing in so it is to their advantage. And they change it like, oh wait, that didn't work out well. Well, let's change it again, and that's it's kind of crazy is, they play it like it's a game. So there's now voter suppression, and it was something that you were talking about that I was like, I'm okay with that, honestly. And so like that's where I think we should start. So,
Okay.
because like there's the thing I'm totally. I mean, first of all, I'm against voter suppression for these reasons, right? I mean, everybody should have access to voting. And I live in a state where it's so easy to vote that I'm kind of like, sometimes I do like this. I'm like, why aren't you all doing it like this? I mean, in Colorado, for those of you who haven't heard us talk about this in the past, so to just understand where my frame of mind is coming from when I have this conversation, if you're not from Colorado, we just automatically get a ballot mailed to us. There's no, I want an absentee ballot. There's none of that. You're registered to vote in Colorado. You get a ballot. I'm an independent, so during the primaries, I actually get 2 ballots. I can only vote in one of the primaries, but I can choose whether I vote in the Republican or the Democratic primary. And then when it comes to general election, I get that sent to me, and it comes in with voter information packet like many people get. I can fill it out. I can drop it off at a drop box. That there's one located right in my, less like a mile away from me in our town city civic center. And then, or I could put it in the mailbox. I can just clip it to my mailbox, and the mailman will take it and mail it for me if I choose.
Right.
That's it. It's so easy that like it's stupid. Like it's a well-oiled machine here, right? And we have a great Secretary of State. Yeah, and she inherited the system, and she just keeps going. She's not trying to fix anything that's broken, and if anything, it's become smoother and smoother, right? One of the reasons why Colorado had all their votes very quickly, because they were compiling and voting for all the early voting and that we had. So when I hear all these issues and how complicated it is in other states, I'm just like, what? And and it's all because of this made-up fear of voter fraud, right? It's so insignificant voter fraud.
It is made up.
It is made up.
The level of the percentage of it is so minute.
Yeah.
But then people use that to say, well, it does exist. Okay, sure, it does exist, but at such a tiny level.
Not enough to make a difference. Not enough.
No.
And if the vote's within one vote, which has never happened really to the scale that we're talking about, then they obviously do recounts and make sure and certify. And they find fraud. They absolutely find fraud, but it's at such a small scale. It's not millions of votes. It's none of that shit, right?
It's not affecting outcomes.
But there are some things that they're trying to limit that, like, I don't believe any of it should be limited, right? That's my principle. But like when there's one thing that you had mentioned that they're doing that I'm like, okay. So let's talk about that. What is the process you'd call it? Harvesting?
Ballot harvesting.
So what is ballot harvesting, Rob?
So the idea is basically that the people's sealed mail-in votes are either, they could be dropped off at a location, right? Could be a box, but it could be a location that where large numbers of people drop their ballots off there. They're collected and then taken to wherever their polling place may be, right? Or it could just be that if I wanted to, on my street, just collect everyone's ballots, right, and take them in myself, and drop them off. I don't see the big deal. Okay,
so I do see the big deal in that one. I feel like as a citizen, you need to trust in either a federally provided ballot box or a location that's been provided to drop off at, or mailing it with a federal employee who is your mailman, and then you've entrusted it to the government, where like I feel like that's where you've done your job as a voter. And again, I'm coming from a place where it's super easy to get that done, right? So it is, to me, I'm just like, why aren't we all just following that model? But I do have a problem with what you're saying, because what you're saying is I can give you my ballot. You're going to knock on my door, and I'm going to give you my ballot, and I'm now entrusting you. And you're now no longer carrying one ballot. You're carrying hundreds, thousands of ballots before it gets to the official location.
I don't think there are people carrying thousands.
Whatever. How many are they? I mean, whatever, hundreds or whatever.
Okay, let's say it's 100.
Let's say it's 100.
100 people on my block.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. It's not random people. It's not like some random person is showing up at your door and saying, hey, entrust me with your ballot. These are generally people who know the people or have a connection to the individuals who they're getting the ballots from, right? So I'm not going to hand my ballot to a stranger, but to a person I know who's going to go in downtown or wherever, the proverbial downtown, to drop it off. There's no problem to me. It's a made-up problem.
Okay, so I get why you're saying it's a made-up problem, but here's the interesting thing about this. I'm not worried about basically, whenever I've seen any fraud when it comes to voting or like manipulation of voting, like things like Lindsey Graham's done, and it tends to be on the Republican side. All right, I'm not saying Democrats don't do it, whatever, but screw you all because it's not the same. There's definitely a mountain of evidence that Republicans have messed and tried to suppress the vote, and the Democrats tend to try to expand the vote. And we're talking. I mean, expanding the vote is what makes sense in a democracy, right? And so, like that, let that aside, I don't trust the Republicans with a system like this. How do I know that they're not going to throw those ballots out? How do I know that they're not going to use this as a loophole to do that? So, like again, it doesn't make sense.
Wait. To throw what ballots out?
Like go collect ballots. Say, no, I'm I'm the perfect person. I'm the guy who's here to collect ballots for everybody for the Democratic Party. And then they, and I get what you're saying. That there's usually people they know.
But that's not it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not the Democratic Party is not going out, or even the Republican side, the Republican Party. That's not what this usually is. This is usually within neighborhoods, right?
Like I'm going to go mail it.
Who are going to go? And a perfect example. There are, and I remember this from specifically when my grandmother, her last few years alive, she was in a nursing home. Number one, I've always said there's large numbers of people whose votes are never counted because there are people in nursing homes who have the mental capacity but don't have the physical capacity to go out and vote. So I think there are millions of people across this country who are older, or even they could be younger. There are younger people in nursing homes too, whose votes are never even thought about, number one. But number two, if there's a bunch of people who I knew, could be a nursing home, could be a senior center, who can't get out, right? But I know them. I'm friends with them. Why can't I go get their ballot and take it in for them?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But like the way you were describing it, it sounded more like there's a coordinated effort to collect a whole bunch of votes, not just like, hey, I'm like Joe from down the street and you guys need to get your votes in. I'm on my way. I'll take them for you, and it's like a friendly thing, Again, it wouldn't even matter if we were talking about a system that just made sense, because like while these people in the nursing home can't get out to mail their ballots, or get their ballots out, there is a male person who comes to that nursing home every day of the working week.
I hear what you're saying. But my point is there is literally no reason that a person, these are, like I said, these are rarely scenarios of some random person who's coming to just collect people's votes, right? So if there's a person who knows these individuals, who knows the people on this block, who knows the people in this building, and is headed downtown and is going to take their ballots, who is harmed? Could they throw them out? Sure. But if I'm someone, I'm a registered independent, but if I'm someone who's, a Democrat and I want my other Democratic neighbors to vote, why would I throw out their ballots?
No, you wouldn't. And again, it comes down to like it's because they've already created a mess up system for voting that this has to even exist, right? Or whatever, where this has to happen. But again, I agree that there is no harm. Part of me is like, what's the big deal about this one? I get the big deal about the other suppression techniques that are being used and how they inhibit people from voting. And this one just was like, can't you just mail it? So that was it. That was, I wasn't trying to, like, really none of it should exist. And the fact that they are blatantly admitting that they know, hey, we know what we're doing is going to help us. And like there was a statement, I forget what the quote is. Let me see if I can pick it up. I think I had it saved.
Was it Georgia or was it the Arizona?
This was Georgia. I forget what was the Arizona one?
Arizona he was basically arguing for the Supreme Court that they lose.
Oh yeah.
We'll lose if we do it this
way. Well, and only with a 6-3 Supreme Court in their favor do they even think they can make that argument. And I think what people have found, even with a Republican-dominated or conservative Supreme Court, is there's still a little bit of logic being used up there. I may not agree with everything going on up there, right? But there's still a little bit of like, this is the law here. This is, and so when you come out and say, well, we're changing this law because we know it's going to help Republicans, wink, wink, it's not working on the Supreme Court, at least, not enough.
It appears not to be.
It appears not to be. You're right. It could be a whole other thing, but um, uh, where was it? I can't find the quote, but he was basically saying that, like, well, we just want to make sure that all these voters who are disenfranchised with the voting system are not going to be disenfranchised anymore. And it's like, what you're really saying is all these white people who are bummed that they lost their vote or for Republicans won't be disenfranchised in voting if they know they're going to win. It's like, to me, that's what I'm hearing in the translation. It's just like, you're going to win.
And they're not being disenfranchised. That's the whole, it's such a phony theory that they're trying to create somehow, that all of these scenarios somehow cheat the system. That if ballots are Harvarded, you've cheated the system. If there's early voting, you've cheated the system.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I don't get that.
First of all, for early voting, the only person, people who actually get cheated in early voting are the people who voted early. Because if you vote early and then all of a sudden, 2 days before the actual in-person election day, you find out that your candidate is a pedophile.
Yeah.
Well, you can't change your vote now.
You cannot change your vote right then, yes. But there's usually not like midnight surprises anymore, really, so...
Not really.
Not really. I mean, everybody knew that, what's his name was a pedophile. Was it Roy Moore? Wasn't that his name?
Oh, but they voted for him anyway.
No, well, a lot of people did, but, yeah. But now that's why we have Tommy Tuberville, isn't
Sunday voting.
What's that?
Tommy Tuberville. They also, in Georgia, one of the things that they're trying to stop is Sunday voting.
Well, right? is that a like a church thing? Is that an anti-church movement?
Large numbers of churches, traditionally black churches, that have what's called souls to the polls. People, they have their church service. They all go together and vote. There's no justifiable reason. I haven't heard what the argument was that they used. Because there's no reason to say that, well, people can't vote on Sunday. Why? What legal reason is there that you can say that people can't vote on a Sunday?
Yeah, I don't get that.
Except to stop this large contingent of people from voting.
Well, I also still don't get why, like, again, this is another reason that like, it should just, officially, Tuesday should be a national holiday. The election day should be a national holiday. All right. I mean, it honestly should be the Monday and that Tuesday, and say it's a national holiday week. And I mean, we still have mail-in early ballot and all that stuff, but like it shouldn't be a work day for most people. And that's the other problem, is that they don't even get to take work off. And that's one of the things that it absolutely can affect poor neighborhoods. And of course means a lot of neighborhoods of color, especially in Atlanta or
Yeah, it also affects, there are also poor
white people. There are people. It affects poor people. It affects poor people.
Yes. And the thing for me, and I think we said this previously, I still believe, maybe this will change one day, the voting, even though we don't have a traditional 9 to 5 Monday through Friday work life anymore, but voting should be, for the president at least, on all day Saturday and all day Sunday, right? And then all day Monday, nationwide, the votes are counted. The winner is announced on Tuesday. Yeah,
and that's what they do, is they do a scheduled thing, and they say, but that's not how they're going to do it, because the media has got their hooks into it enough that they will fight as tooth and nail to get that changed, because then nobody's going to sit down and watch MSNBC and CNN and Fox for like 12 hours straight before they find anything.
And journalists, the news media, whichever word we want to use, and Trump fed off of each other, because the people around him, I don't want to say him because he's not an intelligent person, but the people within his orbit were able to utilize the notion that people have brought into the idea that they have to know who the winner is by a certain time of evening.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
On election night.
I know.
So there's always going to be votes that are counted later, but because we have so created this thing where you have to know that night, he was able to capitalize on that to make it sound like anything that showed up later in the night, well, that must be, a lie or false or something.
Oh, I know. No, and
Yeah,
he had been
it's
saying it for a
fan
long
voting.
time. He had been saying it for a long time because everybody already said before the election, this is how it's going to go. There's going to be this like red mirage. I remember them calling it, and then it was going to be the blue wave that came in after because of the way a lot of these swing states voted. I mean, and you count their votes, right? They do the mail-in votes last, which is weird because you had them. It's like you already had them. So like,
Yeah, there's really no reason why they have to be counted last.
No.
It doesn't even make
No.
sense.
No, it doesn't.
Just start if you want to count them separately in a separate room or something if they want to, which also doesn't make sense. Fine,
yeah, but they do.
But they're counted last.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's just certain states that do that. But yeah, so we already knew that's how the votes were going to go, and we knew that like it was already told by experts that's what was going to happen, and come to find out that's exactly what happened. And so that's why Trump said he's like, if we by midnight we're going to make the announcement, or he made statements like that were crazy. It was like we'll know who the winner is by this point. If we don't, it shouldn't count, which is just insane. It's really it's because Donnie wants his toy now.
Yes.
And that was it, and so little Donnie.
So because of that,
yeah,
then it feeds into the voter suppression because then it makes people feel like, well, we can't have, it's the early votes. The early votes threw us off. If we didn't do early votes and everyone just showed up that day.
I know. I just still think it's funny because there's still plenty of people that actually are super surprised and can't believe that Trump didn't win because of where they live and how everybody where they live is like Trump's the best. And even though you can't tell me what he's done well, right? I mean, I'm not really clear. But so they're like, well, I can't. Everybody I know voted for Trump. All 25 people in our town, or 200 people in our town voted for him. So that's the whole country, right? And it's like,
But to me, it's still based on the notion, which again, why the Electoral College needs to disappear. It's because I can't speak for everyone, right? But many of us, I think, when you go into vote, no one is going into vote thinking, all right, I hope Pennsylvania votes because they have these electoral votes.
Exactly.
Michigan
exactly.
Everyone's just hoping that enough people are voting the way they would like them to.
I know. Well, that's what I say. I mean, like the same thing for Republicans in Colorado. I'd say the same thing. It's like, well, you say Republicans in New York. Hey, congratulations, New Yorkers! Your Electoral College went for Biden. Sorry, Republicans, your vote doesn't count anymore. It just doesn't count. You're done. You don't even get to count towards the total. And yeah, that's stupid. That's just ridiculous. So but we've talked so much about voting, and that we got to keep an eye on the voter suppression. Obviously. It's insane that they're going to do this, but I think I want Stacey Abrams to run for governor in Georgia because then then
that would be
it'll be good.
For her.
It really would be. I think that needs to happen. I really do.
Because that was literally, if you want to talk about something that was stolen, that was literally stolen.
And what a difference in. It was such a dichotomy of like how America has been for women in general, but black women. You have this white guy who is literally one of the dumbest governors I've ever seen. All right?
Yes.
In this guy in Kemp.
Yes.
And then you have this brilliant.
Ron DeSantis is a close.
He is. But then you have this brilliant woman who is black, of course, as well. But I mean, it's like, and she is so qualified and so brilliant for this job, and yet this yokel wins it. And like, I wonder how Georgia feels about him now. After the last year.
Well, I think Georgia is showing how they feel.
I think so too. They
just have to keep that momentum going into 2022.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, but I want to talk about how I feel about some cancel culture stuff.
Oh, all right.
You like that? You like the little slide in this?
Yes.
Because there was this big hoopla about Dr. Seuss being canceled and the for
and
so
the Muppets.
So what it comes down to? Oh, I didn't hear about the Muppets. Oh well, we'll talk about the Muppets too. Well, you have to bring that one up. So the Dr. Seuss company, whatever they're called, there's like Dr. Seuss Enterprises, I think they are, or something like that. They said that there's 6 Dr. Seuss books that won't be published for racist images. And one of them is, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street, which I think
Mm-hmm.
that one had racist images of
In front of me here.
an Asian person. And
Yes.
then there was McGilligut's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, and The Cat's Quizzer. And
Yes, I have it right here.
yeah, and I'm sorry I couldn't pull up the full list on everything. Or if I ran the zoo, which included a drawing of two barefooted African men wearing what appear to be grass skirts with their hair tied above their heads. Yeah, that's crappy imagery there, Dr. Seuss.
Yes.
It is. I, but I have a hard time with this. I really do. So they're not publishing the books anymore, and I feel like this is a
Mm-hmm.
more of an opportunity. By the way, I didn't know any of these zoos, and I think if I ran the zoo, I actually remember as a name,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if I recall the book. And the famous ones I know, right? The Places You Go, Green Eggs and Ham, The
Yes, green
Lorax,
eggs and ham.
which are really the good ones. And let's be honest, I mean, there's a lot of books out there, a lot of authors that are revered have written, and there's some that just aren't very good that they wrote too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It,
Mm-hmm.
it happens, you know. So, but I think that it's I hate to say slippery slope as a thing, but like I think there's two things. First of all, they didn't have to say anything. Like if they hadn't said anything, would we have noticed that these books weren't being published anymore? I guess is the
I
question.
mean, yeah, libraries would, bookstores
Libraries would, okay.
would.
But is it possible that glossing over these racist images is also a way of like kind of whitewashing the past and saying like, this wasn't, I mean, if you kind of try to not allow those to happen, I mean by kind of like ignoring that it happened by not publishing anymore, I feel like it's this missed opportunity. We signed up for Disney Plus when it came out because my daughter is a huge fan of Star Wars and Avengers, not of princesses or anything. She's like all about like the action
Yes.
stuff, and so
She's a new wave feminist.
yes, she is, and so all the stuff that's on there, she loves watching it. So one of the things that happened when Disney did this, and I noticed on some of the, because they put up all of their movies. I haven't looked it up since, but there are some that they had up there that say this was literally had a statement saying there are images in this movie when that were totally acceptable when they were made at their time period. Something that I'm totally paraphrasing, and now they are no longer considered acceptable. So it was right there, like you couldn't miss it when you go in to sign up to watch the video. I actually prefer that method a little bit more because you're not denying it, you're actually pointing it out. Like, hey, we are aware that there's some bad stuff in here. It was a different time, they had different attitudes and blah 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 blah. I think I like that methodology a little bit better because then you're no longer like ignoring your past transgressions or whatever you want to say.
It's not ignoring. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How many memories do you have of seeing an image, be it in a book, a film, or a TV show, that was you, right? That represented what you and who you are, that was offensive?
Oh, well, not very many because I have a little bit of white privilege. I see Italians. If you see an Italian, you would see sometimes, stereotypical imagery of what an Italian guy might look like and how he might talk, right?
Yeah.
So
do the voice a lot.
Yeah, you do the voice, and then there's a mustache and the like greasy looking
yes.
hair or whatever it was. It absolutely existed. And again, I think
But it didn't feel damaging to you in any way.
No, it did not. And so
I think that's a key piece of it. I've seen tons of images of Black characters when I was younger, of gay characters, of gay Black characters, right? There are, lesbians or trans people or Asian identified people from across the diaspora of Asia, right? Who have historically seen very negative image of themselves depicted, and they don't want it out there anymore, right?
Yeah.
the notion, I don't think it's whitewashing, right? Because if we use if we use Germany as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all know Hitler existed.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have statues of him,
No, they don't.
but the notion that, well, that's is that not whitewashing? Why not put the statue up there so we can remember him and talk about
Oh
what he did?
no, that's different though. I mean, and that's why
How is
we.
that different?
Well, it's different because when you have a statue of something, it's more of a sense of honoring something. You know what I mean? Like you're showing reverence to that, which is why I have a problem with Confederate statues. Like if you want those statues, fine, put them in a Confederate statue museum where you can go and like reimagine the past where you like had like revolted against and committed treason and lost, and you would like to look at that and imagine you won and it was a great time. Go ahead, go to that
But a
museum.
children's book is giving reverence to something.
Well,
I'm around little kids. I mean, I guess I understand. I know that you have a daughter
yeah.
who's young also, but I have historically for like the last decade worked around little kids, and right now I am specifically working with them in the first grade space, and all they're doing is learning to read. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There are books everywhere, and books are everything to them. They
Mm-hmm.
take what they see in books to be fact.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a young Asian child in a classroom and you open up a book, right? Everyone's reading Dr. Seuss, green eggs and ham. So, and this is nothing against, I mean, Dr. Seuss definitely had his issues as a person, so I'm not holding him up on a pedestal.
Right.
But if you're that little kid and you open this book, that's offensive to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're being made fun of, right? Because these books are supposedly teaching you about the world.
Right.
So I do see how they can have a damaging effect on people, and I don't necessarily see what the problem is with uh, taking them out of circulation. I'll put it that way. Not publishing new reprints of them.
Yeah, I get that. Like, I mean, first of all, again, I mean, it's not like I'm like, oh my god, I'm such a Dr. Seuss fan, and there's a lot of depth in I Ran the Zoo, and it's none of that. But I have, it's art, whether it's good or not, right? It's a form of creation, whether it's good or not, and I guess it's interesting. And maybe it's not that big of a deal because they're not being published. But like I feel like you should almost like they should almost put it into a compilation of like here's some racist stuff about Dr. Seuss and like
Mm-hmm.
educate people. So they're like, hey, we're gonna honor Dr. Seuss's books that teach us great things like environmentalism and the Lorax, and try new things with green eggs and ham and all of those kind of things. Horton
Mm-hmm.
Hears a Who, which is I think about like I think it's like
Totally forget what that one's about.
it's about giving voice to something that doesn't have a big voice. I think that's kind of a good way to talk.
Mm-hmm.
But and so those are great lessons. Maybe use this as a lesson as well. Like, hey, by the way, here or I don't know. I'm not saying they should
Okay,
keep publishing.
let me pick something else. So here's another example.
Sure.
When right, and there are going to be people who disagree with me, I'm sure, but a movie that I remember from childhood, not from being a little kid, but from childhood, was Revenge of the Nerds. Right?
Totally. Yeah.
Love it.
Saw it
Hilarious.
so
People
many
love it.
times.
Oh, it's so funny. Right. So many times, blah, blah, blah. With the black gay character as the
Lamar.
literal butt of a joke.
Oh,
Right?
completely. Lamar.
So for me,
I remember him.
as a young gay black kid,
Yeah.
that was all that I saw, and that it was a joke. Right? I
Mhm.
don't want more kids. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong. People can be effeminate and so forth and so on. That's less the issue to me. More
And
than
I get that.
it was the butt of a joke,
Yes.
right? Every other kid that I knew who was not gay, still to this day, thinks the movie's hilarious. Loves to watch it, right? More power to the actor. I don't even know if he's still alive, so forth and so on. But the
Mhm.
there was an era in time, right? And I think this is what the big issue is. There was an era in time I guess it all started to change technically around the turn of the century, the year 2000, when it was just considered okay to make fun of, to blatantly make fun of groups of people who usually were not straight white men. And that was okay. Not that there couldn't be straight white men who were also, their characters were the joke, but the overarching story usually had the straight white guy as the hero in some way.
Yeah.
Right? Other people were constantly marginalized in TV shows, in books, in movies. And now people are gaining a degree of agency and they're saying, we don't want that anymore. And we don't want to celebrate what you used to do. And people don't know what to do with it. It's not even just straight white men. Sometimes it's straight black men. Sometimes it's men in general who can't, which would include straight and gay men who have a blind eye to the degree of sort of degradation of female characters for years upon years in books and movies.
Well, Revenge of the Nerds is a perfect example of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's literally a rape scene in it. All right. And that people don't realize. I mean, like the nerd is wearing the mask and
the mask, yeah.
And they're in the moon room and she's like, wow, and then he takes the mask off and of course she's like, that's totally okay that you just did that.
Right.
And it's like, no, that he literally just committed rape. That's rape. I mean, and that's Revenge of the Nerds. But like that, and so yeah, I mean, it was funny because I saw that like recently, like I don't know, a year, and I was like,
I don't know if it was rape. I don't know if I feel like that's too harsh.
Excuse me for a second. Go home. Go out, please. Thank you. Sorry, I'm live, and my daughter is running around behind me, distracting me.
That's so funny. I thought I saw.
Go. Your mom's home. Goodbye. Go. Thank you, dude. Trying to have an adult conversation here, and she's like walking. Yes. So she's got to. She's got to go. She can't be here for that. Love you. Bye. Man. I'm like, I just realized, I'm like, she was behind the curtain. She got in the door behind the curtain. I'm talking about like rape and my daughter. So yeah, sorry. So apologize. First time I ever had to break that fourth wall there, people. Anyway, but yeah, and so I get it. Like, I mean, I remember, and I remember, yeah, I remember thinking it was funny when I was a kid, not because I didn't know better. So I get what you're about Lamar, by the way, and about the other thing,
Lamar.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the thing is for me with cancel culture. When I think about it, I don't think of it in terms of canceling a thing that existed in the past, right? We know it existed, right? We can't pretend that it didn't exist. To me, it's canceling it for the future. And that's what I think a lot of people can't deal with. Because if you do truly examine what the problem was with it in the past, then you won't do it anymore in the future. And for some people, they don't want to let go of that ability to, they find their strength in sort of mocking or demeaning or something. And for them, it's like, what's the big deal? But they're usually never the people who are the target of the thing, you know?
I get what you're saying, but yeah, I mean, it's weird because I feel like there's this fine line where, and I think this is where people are in the cancel culture thing is like, well, what am I do I have to think about everything I have to say? And it's kind of like, well, yeah, you probably, you do.
You should.
You absolutely should. And I think that's what it is a lot of people don't want to have that, like, level. Like I worked in this perfect example. Like there's some people who just think certain things are acceptable, which is insane to me. Like I used to work in a restaurant, a bar down in Colorado Springs. You know, I'm in the Denver area now, but Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs is where you have New Life Church, by the way, and Focus on the Family. And you also have a lot of military. So it's a very conservative city. It's the most conservative city in Colorado, right? And it's second only to Denver in size. But I worked in the downtown area, which of course, even in Colorado Springs, which is like the LA of Colorado, it's very sprawly.
Right.
So like there's a whole East Colorado Springs, which is super conservative. I mean, this could all have changed since I've moved, but it hasn't. And then you have downtown, and you go more. The more west you go, the more liberal it gets, right? And then you're in the smack dab right in the mountains of Pikes, at the bottom of Pikes Peak, and that's where Manitou Springs is. It was like the hippie town in Colorado, in that area, right? So you have a mix, right? And so I worked at this great steakhouse. It was a high-end steakhouse right downtown called the Famous Steakhouse, still there. Shout out to Famous. Go get a steak there if you live down there because it's amazing. But it's expensive. So you had a lot of money coming there, right? So you also get a lot of conservatives. And I would be working at I'm bartending at this, and it's a long horseshoe bar. And there was a gentleman that was always there. He was a good friend of mine. His name was William Moore, an amazing human being, African American man who was in World War II. He was a Korean War. I'm sorry. He was a Navy calligrapher and in the band, and he decided to take up trumpet at age 70. He was just a fascinating guy, and he was an amazing artist and all this. And so we would always have these great conversations. Having this great conversation, and this guy is on the other end of the horseshoe, and he's a new person at the bar, and he comes in and he's just like, he's like, I can't believe you let that N-word sit at this bar. And I'm like, did you just as if you just assumed that because I'm white and I'm in this town or whatever that I'm okay with this. Okay. And right. And so, we kicked him out, by the way. I mean, and my manager backed me up on that because, we had respect for anybody who comes in there, and that's not allowable. But what's still amazing, and I would hear people say they wouldn't go that far, where they just expected you to get it, right? I mean, to be that racist. But there would be things, and I would still hear people say things that you're like, wow, you really just said that. You just assume everybody thinks like you. And I think that what you have with the cancel culture is people like that who are that never cared about what they said ever, and they don't think, now they're upset because they're getting called on that shit. And again, Republican Party being the party that never wants to be wrong, they don't want to be wrong about culture, right? So. Yeah. And so I think that's where a lot of that comes from, right? But there is a thing that there is a little bit of truth in what they're saying about the cancel culture, which is like you said, there's some things that we do need to look at and go, okay, maybe we don't publish this book again. I mean, again, it's still kind of, there's a little part of the back of my head when somebody says we're not going to publish this anymore because of this or that. It's still kind of, there's a little bit of my free speech gene that gets a little upset.
A free speech thing, though. It's if X, right, has been determined in our now contemporary times to be offensive, then why do we need to continue printing X?
Well, for this one specifically, it is printing X, right? I mean, it is their choice. They own. Again, like I said before, I feel like they wouldn't have even had to say anything because these are all books that people will notice, but not that much. I don't know.
We're also too far removed age-wise to even comprehend this. Young kids are reading Dr. Seuss. We're not reading Dr. Seuss because we're adults, so we have no sense of whether or not so to us it's like, well, what's the big deal? It's just Dr. Seuss. But if you're the age category that the books are for, they are reading those. So somewhere there is some Asian child who saw this picture that looks very, I'll put it this way. It may not immediately look offensive to them, but if they take it home to show to their family, right? That's when the storytelling now begins of why this is offensive,
No, you make a good point, and I think you've changed my mind on this. I mean, it's still... Again, I still you need to let the hairs of the back of your neck raise up anytime someone does something like this, and then I think it needs to be examined. Was this the right choice? Look, what it comes down to is they own the rights to print, and they're choosing not to publish it because
they're choosing not to. No one's technically forcing them.
Nobody's canceling anything, really. You're right. Nobody's canceling anything.
Let's see. I'm going to give you two other examples to see if this fits into kind of where you're coming from. So I am a huge fan of and will be for the rest of my life of The Cosby Show. That show is influential in my life experience, in
Sure.
my cultural experience,
Sure.
and as a institutional experience of television storytelling, right?
Yeah.
I understand there are people who despise Bill Cosby, but that's also a separate conversation to me, right?
Oh,
This
yeah.
show,
Mm-hmm.
so there was this whole thing about, well, that show needs to be taken off the air. Well, I completely disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, the show is massive, so you can't pretend that the Cosby Show did not exist, right? Like you can't talk about 1980s America and television and not talk about this show,
But they
right?
will now. They will. I think they will not talk about it. Like if you like,
You
well,
can.
okay.
You
I don't
can't.
disagree with you. By the way, I don't disagree with you because I remember. I mean, everybody watched this show. You know,
Yes.
and I think that's what people don't understand. It was first of all. I mean, you're speaking for yourself as a
Mm-hmm.
black child growing up, and you getting to
Yes.
see
Yes.
a black family where they were professional. They
Yes.
weren't
They
stereotypical. They were just a family, right? With any
they were
family
just a
problems.
family.
Right.
Yes.
They were just a family. And I was a white kid watching that show too. You know, I mean, like, and so in seeing that, and so I agree with you. It was an incredibly influential show. Um, I think it is hard though for people who didn't grow up in our time period to see that as much. You know what I mean?
True.
And,
True.
and and that's why I do think the Cosby Show is going to slowly be faded away, right? I really
Nope.
do.
Let me tell you, as far as the
Okay.
black people who I know, you will drag us kicking and screaming because you cannot make it
Right.
fade away. How are you going to talk about 1980s TV, right? When did it debut? In like 1983 or
Something like
84,
that.
something like
Yeah,
that?
I don't know.
So if you're talking about 1984 to I think 1989, because it's one of like three shows that was number one for 5 years in a row. Like I think All in the Family and maybe like I Love Lucy or something also had that. So you're just going to name the shows that were the top nine. You're just going to not talk about the show that was number one when you're referencing television from the 80s during that time period. Like it's impossible to not talk about it.
Yeah.
So when people would say that show they need to stop running that anymore. That never made sense to me. Like if you don't want to watch it, don't watch it, right? Because my thing was also people didn't want that show. They don't want that show on because they think Bill Cosby is this disgusting person. Meanwhile, Seventh Heaven TV show, Stephen Collins, lead character guy, father on this saintly show, who's on not video on audio, acknowledging his inappropriate behavior with underage girls. That show's still on. Nobody was asking for that show to
Isn't
be
he
taken
still
off.
acting?
He's still out there,
Wow.
right? So why does
I had no idea about that,
Cosby
by
have
the
to
way.
be
I
canceled,
never heard of that. I've never heard that before.
right?
See?
And this is my whole thing. So if you're going to cancel Cosby Show, you better cancel Seventh Heaven or don't say shit to me. I don't want to hear
And we can all
anything
live
about it at
without
all.
Seventh Heaven. I don't think anybody's
You can
really.
live without Seventh
You
Heaven. Don't get me
seriously,
started
we
on
really
that.
could. Yeah.
But my thing is, you can't
Oh,
pretend that the Cosby Show didn't exist,
oh,
right?
Cosby Show debuted in
Oh, in
1984.
1984.
Thank you, Dora Mae,
Thank you.
Roxanne Davis.
Thank you. Yes, my sister.
Is that
Wonderful.
your
She's on
sister?
it. She's
Right.
on it.
She's on it. I love it. That's our
Yes, she
crew.
is.
Right on.
And then, so the a parallel to that, really quick, is R. Kelly, right? There is a cancel R. Kelly movement that has been, very strong, right? And I've seen the documentaries. He's definitely not a. I want to say this right,
Not
right?
all there.
But he's not. Well, he's not all there, but he's definitely beyond inappropriate in his behaviors with people who are underage,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I'm gonna put it that way because I don't want to have a deep, long conversation about him. But there are people who are like, you can never play his music again. And my thing is, if radio stations choose to do that,
It's
right?
art.
But
I
if
mean-
individual people, I've taken him out of my playlist so for the song. There are some people though for whom one of his songs might have been their wedding song, so they're never supposed to play it again,
Yeah.
right? They're never supposed to listen to it again.
Michael
if
Jackson.
people don't. Michael Jackson.
Michael
Another
Jackson.
example. So we're supposed to pretend Michael Jackson didn't exist?
Well, and it's funny because, like, Jackie, my wife, everybody, sang in a band for many years, multiple bands, and it was one of those. And the conversation was really short, by the way. I think it was essentially like, "Hey, are we gonna keep playing Michael Jackson songs at weddings and stuff?" And it's like, yeah, because people still want to hear the songs. I mean, they still make you get up and dance. I'm sorry. I mean, he's still one of the greatest pop artists of all time.
Is.
It's just,
And if people choose not to, again, like with the Dr. Seuss books, if they choose not to have it, fine. If they choose, and again, it's all financial, right? So whoever, I don't know, I mean, Michael Jackson owned a lot of his music, but whoever presently owns the rights to his music, there's tons of money to be made.
Sure.
So the notion that they're going to we're not going to, remaster and Thriller album yet. Really? Because they're making a lot of money off of that. I don't think they're going to do that.
Yeah, I think.
But if people choose not to purchase it, I think that's the best way to combat some of these things. I feel if you're heavily offended by something in Dr. Seuss, right? Mm-hmm. And the company is choosing to continue to publish it, fine.
Just don't buy it. Don't buy it.
You want to encourage people not to buy it? I don't have a problem with that. If people want to encourage people,
well, it's their choice, man. It's your free choice to do that, right? I mean, it's your free choice to go out there and say, don't buy this because this was a racist jerk, or don't buy this because this guy's a pedophile, or don't, I mean, all of those things. I mean, that's perfectly your right in, to me, free speech, and again, I mean, whether you like to admit it or not, it's all art. Art is subjective as to whether it's good art or not, right? But everything Art Kelly created was art. It was his art form. Everything, Kanye creates is art. I know I did say Kanye. But everything anybody does, it is considered art. I do believe in that, right? But it doesn't mean I have to like it or I have to look at it or enjoy it, right? Oh, wait, let's see. Caroline Davis says, the Cosby Show is never going away. They're still talking about white shows in the 1920s. That's true. White actors in the news constantly for crimes, but they are still shown. The other actors in the show should not suffer. Like it or not, the show was, I'm going to have to see more.
Brilliant. TV is his choice.
The show
don't
was
like it, turn
TV.
The channel.
I completely agree with that. If you don't like it, turn the channel. And, she's right. I think that's the biggest thing, and that's why free speech is such a great thing, right? I mean, it's like, but part of free speech is, deal with the fact that somebody's saying something.
There can't be repercussions to it. If people want to put disclaimers, right? So they want to reprint Dr. Seuss books with some sort of disclaimer if they want to. Here's where I think the big issue is, right? So you could put a disclaimer in the front of a book, right? No one is necessarily, no one has to read that if they don't want to.
True.
You can't technically put a disclaimer on a audio, like on a music track.
Right. No, you can't.
Or you play Thriller. This is not going to work.
True.
But I think the issue is really coming from, there are a lot of TV shows and some films where they're now putting in a disclaimer, right? That is, I don't know how to describe it, but you can't fast forward through. It's a locked in thing that sits on your screen for a few minutes. And I think that is what is pissing a lot of people off, because they feel like, well, they're being forced to, I have to sit here and look at this thing telling me about it's not good to be racist. And if it's making you angry that you have to
then you're racist.
Then you're racist. Like, come on.
If a disclaimer about racist content upsets you, you're Jeff Foxworthy should change his whole act.
Oh God, Jeff Foxworthy.
All right. You
might be a racist.
You might be a racist. If you're offended by racial disclaimers about art, you might be a racist.
Just might be.
You just might be a racist.
Might be. Yeah.
If you're more upset about Dr. Seuss than the insurrection on the Capitol, you might be a racist.
You just might be
a racist.
Some t-shirts made.
We should. You just might be a racist. If you want to say all lives matter every time someone says Black Lives Matter, you might be a racist.
You just might be.
Yeah.
So it's. I understand the desire for people to not want certain things to be there, number one. But number two, some of these things are not going away. So it becomes a question of whether the entity that owns the rights continues to produce it, right?
Mhm.
And if people choose to continue to consume it.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening is there are a lot of people who are beginning to consume and purposely and teaching new generations to consume less of something that used to be acceptable, and the people for whom they still want the thing to be acceptable. I didn't use the right language in that sentence, but the people who still want to be acceptable,
Right.
it's bothering them that they're losing that power.
Yeah. Well,
That's all it really is to me.
but really what it comes down to, honestly, I mean, I see this whole cancel culture conversation. There is a little bit of it, right? There's a little bit of anything can go too far. Like, I think Al Franken went too far on the cancel culture side because it was in Democrats. What? Because it was just completely went too far. And even the people who were like canceling him at that time are now like, yeah, we went too far, and they were overreacting, and it was like we're going to be holier than thou on the left side, and I think that there is a problem there, and it does give red meat in a sense to the Republican side to like have an argument against it. It's like, see how crazy these liberals are, and they're like canceling, but it really is a made up upset thing, just like the whole war on Christmas and all that kind of shit. It's just something to try to like froth people up, and it's to me.
And what is the thing that you're canceling, right? People who believe they're canceling Dr. Seuss, although that's not what they're doing.
No,
it's about a thing in the book that people today find offensive.
Yeah,
people who want to cancel the Cosby Show because they don't like Bill Cosby.
What he did. Yeah.
What he did. But what in the show? There's nothing in the show.
Look, I mean, and Bill Cosby was hilarious. I mean, his stand-up himself, I remember as a kid, was the first stand-up act I ever watched as a kid. And I was laughing the whole time. I thought it was hilarious. And it was clean and it was good for a kid. I mean, it's like, and so like I got into like watching stand-up because of that, I think. To me, again, it's a you as a human being does not negate the performance that was already put there, and that performance was a lot of people on TV. I get that it was Bill, but it was Felicia Rashad. It was
Malcolm Jamal Warner,
exactly.
All of them. Yes.
And so you're right. I mean, it does hurt all of them. I mean, Kevin Spacey is a horrible human being who is an amazing actor. I'm sorry. Like, I don't think don't be mad at me for that. I'm sorry. That's art, I mean, Leonardo da Vinci may have been a total asshole, by the way, but he's still a great artist. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know, but like, we don't know. But like, his performances were amazing. And when when you find out the truth about the guy, it bums you out, but it's still, it's what it is. Louis C.K. is hilarious.
Louis C.K. I loved him so much. I'm so angry with
him. We will have to have a conversation about Louis C.K. I am very angry about the Louis C.K. situation because I think
I liked him a lot. I think he brought that on himself.
He did bring it on himself. Oh, no. Brought it on himself.
100%.
But like when that happened, I remember when that happened, I was like, really? And like nothing about it was surprising, by the way, because it totally like was like, oh yeah, because he talked about masturbation a lot. It was just like,
yes, he did.
But
yes, he did.
It was, I mean, his shit's still funny though. I mean, it's still funny.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And that's the tricky aspect.
It is.
Of it. Where do you separate what is it? Within the idea of canceling something, whether it's good or bad, are you canceling the person? Are you canceling their art? Are they intertwined? Are they two separate things?
Ooh, see, Paul Rubens is a perfect example of that, I think, as well. Paul Rubens is like he was basically canceled for a long time. And those of you who don't know who Paul Rubens is, he was Pee Wee Herman, and poor guy. I'm sorry to bring up the bad memories, Paul. He's not listening. It doesn't matter. But he was caught in a adult movie theater masturbating.
But here's the thing, why I think I'm glad you mentioned him in these final minutes, because he's actually a very unique, why it backfired for him is his only persona
Yes.
was this, like, I mean, definitely quirky, but a kid's
Yes.
person,
Yes.
right? A kid's character.
Yes.
So that's what actually hurt. If I think if Paul Rubens was just, an actor on a TV show, it might have hurt him for a little while, but it wasn't. People associated him with children.
Well, because Pee Wee, yeah, because he had a show. He had a whole enterprise as Pee Wee Herman. He
Yes,
really did.
yes.
And then
Even
after
though the
that,
show was a crazy, quirky
it
mess,
was
but
no,
yeah,
it was, but like it was a lot of people loved that show. They thought it was brilliant.
yeah.
And then it was funny because then after a while you like I remember seeing some movie once and I was like, that's Paul Rubens. And he was some creepy dude. He was a creepy dude. Like he had like longer, greasy hair, and he was like kind of creepy. And I was like, okay, I get it. He's got it. That's how he had to reinvent himself as the quirky. He's the quirky, creepy guy now. Because really, let's be honest, doing that in a triple X rated, that is the weirdest thing to me personally. Like I still don't get. I don't get this whole thing. And we'll have to have another conversation. We have to have a woman on for this conversation as well, because maybe she'll have some insight. Because I've never had a guy masturbate in front of me before. I don't get that at all. Like as a thing of these guys who are like into like masturbating and in front of an unwilling participant in movie theaters, in front of like doing the Harvey Weinstein thing into a plant or whatever. What is that? That's
a whole separate thing. Paul Rubens was in a movie theater.
Paul Rubens was in a movie theater. He was trying to do it in the dark of a movie. What I don't even want to know. But yeah, then you have these other guys like Louis C.K. doing, and like that is just weird.
I mean, it's a power trip.
It's such a weird thing. It is really like. To me, I feel like it's a vulnerable thing. That's what's funny. Like, I would feel like it's more vulnerable to expose yourself in this awkward manner of, you know what I mean? Like,
no, I think they feel powerful. Because I think in many of those instances, right, the individual who was on the receiving end, they felt so assaulted in that moment, right? And for me, and I hear many guys say, and it does run through my head as well. Like, well, why don't you just get up and leave? I would just get up and leave.
Yeah.
But you and I we grew up socialized as men.
Right.
So men we're socialized to react differently, whether that's correct or not. And they didn't do it to a guy, Harvey Weinstein.
No, he did not. He did not do it to Matt Damon.
Leo DiCaprio.
Or maybe he did. Maybe he did.
Oh yeah. Maybe we don't know.
Maybe you don't know. Maybe they're all like, dude, what's your problem? He did it to us. We don't care.
Yeah. It could be. It just might be.
He did that in my ficus plant right over there. It's like
exactly.
I know. It withered and died right after. It was just
my God, I can't with you.
But they're just not coming out about it. I don't know. But it's just I know that really took a turn. That took a
turn.
It took a turn.
It's a good thing to wind up on. Maybe we'll get Matt Damon on. Maybe he'll tell us if it happens.
We'd love to talk to him about that, and find out why they all knew that he. By the way, they all knew he was like that. I think that's what's amazing to me.
But people did. But he had. It's a power trip thing that we just, for the most part. Boys are not socialized to do that. The expectation would be that if you did that he would fight back, right?
Yeah.
But if you're and what's his face? Harvey Weinstein isn't even which proves it's not a build thing, right? Because he's not some big built strong guy. He's just like short fat guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But he has power.
Yeah,
and he knew that.
Yeah, it's just strange. And the Bill Cosby thing was weird too, because what's odd about Bill Cosby, by the way, is that, and I think that's what made it so insidious, is that he was so planned. He had drugs ready. He was like ready to roll on this, and I think that's what is kind of upsetting.
But we do have to have another conversation about that, because a piece of what frustrates me about how the story of him keeps playing out is that they I'll put it this way. I feel like a piece of it is that I was supposed to be outraged, or people were supposed to be outraged, that this person, Bill Cosby, the citizen, was doing drugs at parties in Hollywood in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you were, I'm happy to have a conversation about whether or not people should be given drugs against their will, but I'm not going to pretend that that wasn't literally what everybody was doing in 70s Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I can absolutely have a conversation about it being incorrect to not let someone know that you're putting a drug in the whatever. But I'm not going to act like this is some unheard of.
Like it could have been happening.
And it could have been happening in the next room at every party that everybody was at in Hollywood in the 70s. Like, that's not unique. I feel like it was painted as if it was some kind of unique. Oh my God! You mean there was a person who was doing like drugs and at the Playboy Mansion? What?
I know, right? Like, well, it would be more of a story if they weren't doing drugs in the 70s in the Playboy. You went to the Playboy Mansion and you weren't high? What? You didn't do what?
Right.
You didn't drink?
Exactly.
Nothing?
Exactly.
So I get what you're saying there. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
We're at time. Though.
We are at time. We gotta stop. Yeah. Great wild as weird conversation as always. There was it, by the way, just to give Dorme some props. She just said, "Yeah, we wouldn't be watching and listening to anything if we looked at everyone's private life." I totally agree. Hollywood would be empty.
Be nothing on TV.
Yeah, because everybody's a freak in some way, right? I guess. There you go.
Mm-hmm. There's something.
Well, awesome. This was fun.
Yes, it was.
As always. Gonna put some music on for the rollout. So if you guys liked all this, please feel free to keep commenting. Spread the word. We do this every Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock Mountain Time, West Coast. Figure it out.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And Central. See, Mountain never gets mentioned. We never get mentioned. It's like because you have Chicago gets mentioned for Central and all that, and then and for us. Yeah, mountains, they just forget about us. And so you got to give us some props.
We're showing mountains some love.
That's right. We're showing some love. Thank you so much. We'll be back next week. And until next time, peace, love
and happiness.